Imagine this: a devoted wife, glowing with pregnancy after years of trying, discovers her husband's secret affair right before their baby's gender reveal. But that's just the beginning. What if he doesn't stop at betrayal? What if he lures her on a romantic baby moon to the Bahamas, only to abandon her in shark-infested waters, leaving her and their unborn child to die for a massive insurance payout? Sounds like a nightmare. Right. But wait, survival is only the start. Rescued by a mysterious CEO with his own vendetta, she plots a comeback that will shatter lives, expose dark secrets, and deliver jaw-dropping twists you won't see coming. From heart-wrenching drama to epic revenge, this story of empowerment and resilience will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stick around till the end, you won't believe how it unfolds. If you're hooked, hit that like button if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal. Comment below what you'd do in her shoes. Share this with a friend who loves intense stories, and subscribe for more mind-blowing tales like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications. Next video drops soon. Let's dive in. Sarah Mitchell adjusted the rearview mirror one more time, practicing her smile in the reflection. At 38, she still felt that flutter of excitement that came with sharing good news, especially news this monumental. Her hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly, now showing clearly at 20 weeks. "It's a boy, David," she whispered to her reflection, trying out different tones. "We're having a son," she giggled softly, imagining her husband's reaction. After 15 years of marriage and 3 years of trying to conceive, this pregnancy felt like their miracle. The Connecticut morning was crisp and clear as Sarah parked outside the medical center. Dr. Martinez had scheduled the anatomy scan for 11 a.m., and David had promised to meet her there straight from his morning client meeting. His real estate development company had been busier than ever, which meant longer hours but also meant they could finally afford the nursery of their dreams. Sarah checked her phone. No messages from David yet, but his meetings often ran long. She decided to grab a coffee from the little shop next to the medical center while she waited. The baby had been particularly active this morning, and she wanted to calm her nerves before the big reveal. As she approached the coffee shop window, Sarah's heart stopped. Through the glass, she saw David leaning across a small table, his hands cupping the face of a young woman with striking blonde hair. The woman was laughing, her head thrown back in pure joy, and David was gazing at her with an expression Sarah hadn't seen in years. It was the look he used to give her during their early dating days, when everything was new and electric. The pregnant wife, betrayed, stood frozen as her husband kissed the other woman with a passion that made Sarah's stomach lurch. The ultrasound photo in her hand began to shake as the devastating reality crashed over her like a cold wave. The woman was Jessica, David's 26-year-old secretary. Sarah had met her at several company events, had even complimented her efficiency and bright personality. Jessica had always been so sweet to Sarah, asking about the pregnancy with what seemed like genuine excitement. Sarah's legs felt weak as she watched David stroke Jessica's cheek tenderly. This wasn't a business meeting. This was a heartbreaking family drama unfolding right before her eyes, and she was the last to know about it. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed as another customer entered, and David's eyes flickered toward the sound. For a split second, his gaze met Sarah's through the window. Instead of shock or guilt, Sarah saw something far worse in her husband's expression: relief, as if he was glad she finally knew. David whispered something to Jessica, who glanced toward the window with a mixture of sympathy and smugness. Then David stood, straightened his tie, and walked out of the coffee shop with the casual confidence of a man who had just made a decision. "Sarah," he said, approaching her with his hands in his pockets, "I didn't expect to see you here so early." "Our appointment is in 15 minutes, Sarah managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Remember the baby's gender reveal?" David's jaw tightened. "Right, the appointment. David, what is this? What was that in there?" Sarah gestured toward the coffee shop, where Jessica was now looking at her phone, seemingly unbothered by the destruction she had just caused. "We need to talk," David said, but his tone was cold, businesslike. This wasn't the voice of a husband caught in a mistake. This was the voice of a man delivering bad news to a client. Here, now I'm about to find out if we're having a son or daughter, and you want to talk about your affair with your secretary. The words tumbled out of Sarah faster than she could process them. Keep your voice down, David hissed, glancing around the parking lot. And it's not just an affair. Sarah, it's been going on for 8 months. 8 months. Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis. 8 months meant it started before they conceived. 8 months meant David was with Jessica while they were trying to get pregnant, while Sarah was tracking ovulation cycles and taking prenatal vitamins and dreaming about their future family. But I'm pregnant, Sarah said stupidly, as if that fact alone could somehow undo what she had just learned. I know, David replied, and his tone carried an edge that made Sarah's blood run cold. We need to discuss what we're going to do about that. Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. What we're going to do, David. This is our baby. This is what we wanted. It's what you wanted, David corrected. I never really wanted kids. Sarah, I thought I did. But when it actually happened, he shrugged, as if discussing a change in dinner plans. The midlife betrayal story was unfolding in the most brutal way possible. Sarah had read about women who discovered their husband's affair during pregnancy, but she never imagined the callousness could run so deep. You've been pretending for 8 months, Sarah's voice cracked. You've been lying to me while I planned nurseries and bought baby clothes and dreamed about our son. Son, David's eyebrows raised. So you already know. I saw the ultrasound yesterday when Dr. Martinez printed it, Sarah admitted. I wanted to surprise you, David laughed, but there was no humor in it. Surprise? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. I have a surprise for you, too. Sarah stared at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. In many ways, it did. Divorce papers, David said simply. I had my lawyer draw them up last week. I was going to give them to you after the appointment, but since we're being honest now, the pregnant wife betrayed by cheating husband took the envelope with numb fingers. The official letterhead of David's lawyer swam before her eyes as tears began to blur her vision. You planned this, Sarah whispered. You planned to destroy our marriage on the day we find out about our son. I plan to be honest with you, David said. Something I should have done months ago. Jessica and I are in love. Sarah, real love. Not the comfortable, settled kind we have. She makes me feel alive again. Sarah felt something die inside her chest. Not just her marriage, but her faith in her own judgment. How had she missed this? How had she been so blind to the man she had been living with for 15 years? What about the baby? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. That's up to you, David said. But Jessica and I are moving to California. I'm starting fresh out there, and I can't do that with the baggage of a failed marriage and a child I never really wanted. The heartbreaking discovery during pregnancy felt like a physical blow. Sarah doubled over slightly, clutching her belly as if she could protect her unborn son from the rejection he would never remember, but somehow already felt. You're abandoning us, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. I'm choosing happiness, David replied. For the first time in years, I'm choosing what I actually want instead of what's expected of me. Sarah looked up at the medical center, where Dr. Martinez was probably wondering where they were. Other couples would be celebrating today, learning about their babies surrounded by love and excitement. Sarah was learning that she would be doing this alone. I won't sign the papers, Sarah said suddenly. Not today. Not like this. David sighed. Sarah, don't make this harder than it has to be. We can do this amicably, or we can do it through lawyers. But it's happening either way. I need time to think. Fine, but Jessica and I leave for California in 2 weeks. With or without your signature. David turned to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, Sarah, you'll be a good mother. You always wanted this more than I did. As David disappeared around the corner, Sarah sank onto a nearby bench, still clutching the ultrasound photo and the divorce papers. The Connecticut autumn wind picked up, sending leaves swirling around her feet like the remnants of her shattered life. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Tell Dr. Martinez I had an emergency. Get the results and we'll talk tonight. Sarah stared at the message, then slowly deleted it. She wouldn't be telling Dr. Martinez anything about David's emergency. She would be walking into that appointment alone, learning about her son alone, and figuring out how to build a life alone. But as she stood up and walked toward the medical center, Sarah felt something unexpected stirring in her chest alongside the devastation. It was small and fragile, but it was there, determination. David had chosen Jessica and California and his new life. Sarah was choosing her son and herself and whatever came next. She didn't know it yet, but that choice would save her life in ways she couldn't imagine. As the first drops of rain began to fall, mixing with the tears on Sarah's cheeks, she whispered to her belly, "It's just you and me now, little one, but we're going to be okay." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 3 weeks after discovering David's affair with his secretary, Sarah Mitchell sat in Dr. Patricia Caldwell's office, surrounded by the calming beige walls and inspirational posters that seem standard in every therapist's practice. The book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, lay open on her lap, pages filled with yellow highlights and desperate margin notes. "Tell me about the therapy sessions with David," Dr. Caldwell prompted gently, her pen poised over a notepad. Sarah shifted in the comfortable chair, her hand unconsciously moving to her 23-week belly. "He's been showing up," she said carefully. "That has to mean something, right?" Dr. Caldwell's expression remained neutral. "What does it mean to you that he's willing to fight for us, for our family?" Sarah's voice carried a hope that even she could hear was fragile. "He ended things with Jessica. He told me he did." Sonny, the pregnant wife betrayed was clinging to every small sign of remorse from her husband. 3 sessions with their marriage counselor had given Sarah enough hope to redecorate the nursery, to believe that their midlife betrayal story might have a different ending than the ones she read about in her support group online. "Has he shown you any proof that the relationship with his secretary is over?" Dr. Caldwell asked. Sarah hesitated. "He doesn't have to prove anything to me. I trust him." Even as she said it, Sarah knew how hollow it sounded. Trust was exactly what had been shattered, yet she was trying to rebuild it on the flimsiest of foundations. "Sarah, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," Dr. Caldwell quoted. Maya Angelou said that. "What did David show you about who he is?" "That he made a mistake," Sarah said quickly. "That he was going through something, maybe a midlife crisis. Men do that." "Right. They panic about getting older and make stupid decisions." Dr. Caldwell set down her pen. "Is that what David told you?" "Not in so many words, but in our couples session yesterday, he talked about feeling trapped by expectations. He said Jessica made him feel young again, but that it wasn't real, that what we have is real." The heartbreaking family drama had taken on a new narrative in Sarah's mind, one where David was the confused husband who had lost his way but was finding his way back to her. She needed this narrative like she needed air. "And how did that make you feel hopeful?" Sarah admitted, "For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe we could survive this. Maybe our son would grow up with both his parents after all." That evening, Sarah was in the nursery, hanging new curtains with tiny baseball prints, when David came home. He had been working late every night since their second therapy session, but Sarah told herself it was because he was trying to provide for their growing family. "Hey," David said from the doorway, and his voice was softer than it had been in weeks. "Hi," Sarah replied, turning to face him with a tentative smile. "What do you think too much with the sports theme?" David looked around the room that Sarah had transformed yet again. She had painted over the neutral yellows with a soft blue, assembled a new crib, and filled the space with everything a baby boy could need. "It's nice," David said, though his tone was flat. "Very complete." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. "I thought you'd be happy. I used the money from my freelance writing to pay for everything. I didn't touch our joint account. I'm not worried about the money, Sarah. Then what? Sarah set down the curtain rod and turned to face her husband fully. David, talk to me. We're supposed to be working on communication. Remember, David sank into the new rocking chair Sarah had bought, looking suddenly exhausted. I brought you something. He pulled out a small wrapped box, and Sarah's heart leaped. It had been months since David had given her an unexpected gift. What's the occasion? Sarah asked, settling onto the ottoman across from him. No occasion. I saw it and thought of you. Sarah unwrapped the box carefully, savoring the moment of tenderness. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant. David, it's beautiful, Sarah breathed, genuinely touched. Read the inscription, David said quietly. Sarah held the pendant up to the light. Engraved in tiny script were the words, "For my Sarah, my heart, my home." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. This was the David she had married, the man who used to surprise her with thoughtful gestures and romantic words. I know I've hurt you, David continued. I know I've made mistakes that I can't take back, but I want to try. Sarah, I want to try to be the husband you deserve and the father our son needs. This was the moment Sarah had been praying for, the breakthrough she had been hoping their therapy sessions would produce. David was finally admitting his mistakes and recommitting to their marriage. I love you, Sarah whispered, moving to sit on the arm of his chair. I've never stopped loving you. David reached up and touched her face, and for the first time in weeks, his touch felt familiar and safe. I have an idea, David said. What if we went away for a long weekend, just the two of us, before the baby comes and everything changes? Sarah's heart soared, like a baby moon. Exactly. We could go back to the Bahamas, to that resort where we honeymoon. Start fresh, you know? The husband affair with Mistress seemed like a distant nightmare as Sarah imagined reconnecting with David in the place where they had been happiest. The Bahamas held their best memories, long walks on the beach, intimate dinners, dreams about their future together. When Sarah asked, already mentally packing, next weekend, I already checked, and you're clear for travel until 36 weeks. We'd be cutting it close to the deadline, but it would be our last chance. Sarah kissed David's forehead, feeling lighter than she had in months. Yes, absolutely yes. That night, as Sarah lay in bed next to David for the first time since discovering his affair, she felt cautiously optimistic about their future. David's arms around her felt protective rather than suffocating, and his promises felt sincere rather than manipulative. She had been watching This Is Us reruns earlier, crying at the scenes of couples working through their problems and coming out stronger. Maybe she and David could be like that. Maybe their son would grow up hearing the story of how his parents almost split up but chose love instead. Sarah's sister Emma called the next morning, her voice tight with concern. Are you sure about this trip? Sarah, it's great that David is making an effort, but the Bahamas right now? What's wrong with the Bahamas? Sarah asked, defensive. It's where we were happiest. It's just so far away. And you're pregnant. What if something happens? Nothing's going to happen, Sarah insisted. David's being so attentive lately. Yesterday he brought me flowers just because, and he gave me this beautiful necklace. Emma was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I love you, and I want your marriage to work out. But doesn't it feel a little sudden? The gift, the trip, the sudden change in behavior. People can change, Emma, especially when they realize what they're about to lose. But nothing, Sarah cut her off. I know you're trying to protect me, but I need you to support me right now. David and I are rebuilding our marriage, and this trip is going to be the fresh start we need. After hanging up with Emma, Sarah felt a nagging doubt creep in. Was she being naive? Was she so desperate to save her marriage that she was ignoring red flags? But then David came home early from work with dinner from her favorite Thai restaurant and a prenatal massage oil he had researched specifically for third trimester pregnancy. He spent the evening rubbing her swollen feet and talking about baby names, and Sarah's doubts melted away. I was thinking maybe Gabriel, David suggested as he worked out a knot in Sarah's calf. It means God's strength. Gabriel Mitchell. Sarah tested the name. I love it. Our little Gabriel. Our little miracle, David corrected, and his voice carried an emotion that made Sarah's heart flutter with hope. That night, as David held her close and whispered apologies and promises into her hair, Sarah felt like she was finally getting her husband back. The heartbreaking discovery during pregnancy had led to this moment of healing, and she was grateful they had found their way back to each other. She had no way of knowing that David's renewed attention was not about love or remorse. She had no way of knowing that Jessica was already in the Bahamas, waiting for them to arrive. She had no way of knowing that the necklace David had given her was identical to one he had given Jessica the week before. Most importantly, Sarah had no way of knowing that David's plan for their fresh start involved making sure she never made it home alive. As Sarah drifted off to sleep in David's arms, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances and new beginnings. She was finally getting the marriage she had always wanted. She just didn't realize it would cost her everything. The turquoise waters of Nassau sparkled like liquid diamonds as Sarah Mitchell stepped onto the deck of the charter yacht David had rented for their baby moon. At 24 weeks pregnant, she moved carefully but felt more energetic than she had in months. The Bahamas' sunshine felt like a blessing on her skin, and David's attentiveness over the past 3 days had been everything she had hoped for. You look beautiful, David said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her growing belly. The pregnancy glow is real. Sarah leaned back into her husband's chest, feeling genuinely happy for the first time since discovering his affair with his secretary. They had spent their days walking the beaches of their honeymoon resort, talking through their problems, and planning for their son's arrival. I can't believe we almost lost this, Sarah murmured, watching dolphins play in the distance. But we didn't, David replied, his voice strange in a way Sarah couldn't quite identify. We found our way back to each other. Captain Martinez, a weathered local man in his 60s, approached them with snorkeling gear. You folks ready for the reef tour? The water's perfect today. Crystal clear visibility. Sarah hesitated, her hand moving to her belly. Is it safe for the baby? The doctor said light swimming was fine, David reminded her. And snorkeling is even easier than swimming. You just float and look at the pretty fish. The reef here is spectacular, Captain Martinez added. 20 minutes out, and you'll see more marine life than you can imagine. Very calm waters today. Sarah looked at David, who was already putting on his gear with an enthusiasm she hadn't seen from him in years. Come on, sweetheart. When's the next time we'll get to do something like this? Once Gabriel arrives, we'll be too busy for adventures. The mention of their son's name sealed it for Sarah. This was their last hurrah as a couple, their final romantic adventure before becoming parents. The pregnant wife betrayed was finally becoming the pregnant wife redeemed. 20 minutes later, the yacht anchored near a pristine coral reef that seemed to glow with underwater life. Sarah had never seen water so clear. She could see straight down to the coral formations 30 feet below. It's like looking into an aquarium, Sarah breathed, adjusting her snorkel mask. Even better, David said, but his tone was tense in a way that made Sarah glance at him curiously. You okay? She asked. Perfect, David replied, though he kept checking his watch. Absolutely perfect. Captain Martinez helped Sarah into the water first, making sure she was comfortable and buoyant before David joined her. The water was warm and soothing, and Sarah immediately felt weightless in a way that gave her pregnant body relief. This is amazing, Sarah called out, floating on her back and looking up at the cloudless sky. I can see why people fall in love with the ocean. David swam closer to her, his movements efficient and purposeful. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Now, Sarah laughed, treading water easily with her snorkel gear, keeping her afloat. Can it wait until we're back on the boat? No, David said, and his voice carried an edge that made Sarah's stomach clench. It can't wait. That's when Sarah noticed Captain Martinez starting the yacht's engine. The sound carried clearly across the water, and Sarah turned to see the boat beginning to move away from them. "Hey!" Sarah called out, waving her arms. "Hey! We're still in the water!" But Captain Martinez wasn't stopping. If anything, the yacht was picking up speed, heading back toward Nassau without them. "David, what's happening?" Sarah's voice was tight with the first threads of panic. David was treading water next to her, but he wasn't calling out to the departing boat. He wasn't even looking at it. He was looking at Sarah with an expression she had never seen before, cold, calculating, and completely without love. "I'm sorry, Sarah," David said, but his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "I really am. But this is the only way." "The only way for what?" Sarah's voice rose with fear and confusion. "David, we need to swim after the boat. We need to get help." "No," David said simply. "We don't." That's when Sarah saw a sleek speedboat approaching from the opposite direction. Her heart leaped with relief until she recognized the figure at the wheel. Jessica, David's secretary, wearing a designer bikini and oversized sunglasses, was piloting the boat with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "David," Sarah's voice was barely a whisper as the horrible truth began to dawn on her. "Jessica and I have been planning this for months," David said, still treading water with an eerie calm. "The reconciliation, the therapy, the baby moon, all of it was designed to get you here." The speedboat was close enough now that Sarah could see Jessica's smile, bright and predatory against her perfectly applied lipstick. "But why?" Sarah gasped, struggling to process what was happening. "David, I'm carrying your son." "A son I never wanted," David replied. "A son that would complicate everything Jessica and I are trying to build together." The heartbreaking family drama was revealing itself to be something far more sinister than infidelity. This was attempted murder, planned and executed by the two people Sarah had trusted most. "The life insurance policy," Sarah said suddenly, the pieces clicking into place. "The one you increased last year. 2.5 million, David confirmed. "More than enough for Jessica and me to start fresh in California." Sarah tried to swim toward the speedboat, her pregnant body moving sluggishly through the water. Jessica, please, you can't do this." But Jessica wasn't looking at Sarah with sympathy or regret. She was looking at her with the cool assessment of someone watching a problem about to solve itself. "Nothing personal." "Sarah," Jessica called out over the engine noise. "But David and I are in love, real love, and you're in the way." "My baby," Sarah screamed, her hands moving protectively to her belly. "Please think about my baby." "I am thinking about babies," Jessica replied. "The babies David and I are going to have together." That's when Sarah noticed the shadows moving beneath the water. At first, when she thought they were just large fish, but as they circled closer, she realized with growing horror what they were. Reef sharks. Half a dozen of them, drawn by the commotion and the vibrations in the water. "David, please," Sarah begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll disappear. You'll never have to see me or the baby again." But David was already swimming toward Jessica's boat, his powerful strokes carrying him away from Sarah and toward his new life. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he called back. But he didn't sound sorry. He sounded relieved. But dead wives don't change their minds about custody arrangements. The speedboat's engine roared to life as David hauled himself aboard. Sarah watched in frozen terror as the two people she had loved most in the world prepared to abandon her to die in shark-infested waters. "David!" Sarah screamed one final time, her voice carrying across the water with desperate strength. "David, please, I love you." But David was already kissing Jessica, already celebrating his freedom, already forgetting the pregnant wife he was leaving to drown. As the speedboat disappeared toward the horizon, Sarah found herself alone in the vast ocean, treading water with her 24-week pregnant belly, surrounded by predators that seemed to grow bolder with each passing minute. The midlife betrayal story had become a fight for survival, and Sarah was losing. She felt the first contraction hit her like a lightning bolt, the stress and terror causing her body to rebel against the pregnancy it was supposed to protect. Sarah doubled over in the water, gasping with pain and fear. "No," she whispered to her unborn son. "No, Gabriel, stay with me. We're going to survive this. We have to survive this." But as another contraction gripped her and the shark circled closer, Sarah began to understand the true depth of David's betrayal. He hadn't just broken her heart or destroyed their marriage. He had tried to murder her and their child in the most horrible way imaginable. The pregnant wife betrayed was now the pregnant wife abandoned to die. And the heartbreaking discovery during pregnancy had become a fight for two lives instead of just one. As Sarah fought to stay afloat, she made a promise to her unborn son if they survived this. She would make David and Jessica pay for what they had done. She would become stronger than they ever imagined possible. But first, she had to live through the next hour. The sharks were getting closer, and Sarah was running out of strength. Sarah Mitchell had been floating in the shark-infested waters for what felt like hours when she saw the massive yacht approaching on the horizon. Her arms ached from treading water. Her lips were cracked from salt exposure, and the contractions had thankfully stopped. Though she wasn't sure if that was good news or bad news for her 24-week pregnancy, the sharks had been circling but not attacking. Seemingly more curious than aggressive, Sarah had read somewhere that reef sharks rarely attacked humans unless provoked, and she clung to that knowledge as desperately as she clung to consciousness. The yacht that approached was nothing like the modest charter boat David had rented. This was a floating palace, easily over 100 feet long, with gleaming white sides and more technology than most small cities. As it drew closer, Sarah could see a man standing at the bow, binoculars trained on her location. Sarah tried to wave, but her arms barely lifted above the water. Her voice, when she attempted to call out, came out as barely more than a croak. The salt water had taken its toll, and exhaustion was setting in fast. But the yacht was definitely heading toward her. Someone had seen her. The next thing Sarah knew, she was being pulled from the water by strong, gentle hands. A life preserver had been thrown to her, and now she was being hauled up a ladder that seemed to stretch on forever. Her legs gave out the moment she reached the deck, and she collapsed onto the warm, solid surface with a sob of relief. "Easy there," a deep voice said above her. "You're safe now." Sarah looked up to see a man in his early 40s crouching beside her, his dark hair slightly gray at the temples and his blue eyes filled with concern. He was handsome in the way that suggested both intelligence and success, and he was wrapping a luxurious towel around her shoulders with practiced efficiency. "I'm Marcus," the man said. "Marcus Blackwood, and you're Sarah Mitchell." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "How do you know my name?" Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Because I know exactly what happened to you out there. And I know exactly who did it." Before Sarah could process what that meant, Marcus was helping her to her feet and guiding her toward what appeared to be a medical bay equipped with everything a small hospital might have. "I need to check on your baby," Marcus said, his tone professional but kind. "I have medical training, and this yacht is equipped with ultrasound equipment. Will you let me examine you?" Sarah nodded mutely, still trying to process the fact that she was alive, that someone had found her, that her unborn son might still be okay, despite the trauma they had just endured. The ultrasound screen flickered to life, and Sarah held her breath as Marcus moved the wand across her belly. The familiar sound of a rapid heartbeat filled the small room, and Sarah burst into tears of relief. "Strong heartbeat," Marcus confirmed. "Your son is a fighter, just like his mother." "How did you know I was having a boy?" Sarah whispered. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Because I know a lot more about your situation than you might expect. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, but you need to know the truth about your husband." Over the next hour, as Sarah sipped warm broth and wrapped herself in dry clothes Marcus provided, he revealed information that shattered what remained of her faith in David Mitchell. "Your husband has been planning this for almost a year," Marcus explained, showing Sarah a tablet filled with documents and photographs. The affair with Jessica wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated. David approached her specifically because she matched a certain profile. Sarah stared at the photos of David and Jessica together, time-stamped from months before Sarah had discovered the affair. What profile? Young, ambitious, willing to do anything for money and status. Marcus said grimly. Jessica isn't David's first affair. Sarah, she's just the first one he decided to build a future with. The tablet showed bank records, insurance documents, and what appeared to be detailed plans for Sarah's murder, disguised as an accidental drowning. But why are you showing me this? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. Who are you? How do you know all of this? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean where Sarah had nearly died. Because David Mitchell tried to destroy my sister 3 years ago. Sarah's blood ran cold. Your sister, Amanda Blackwood? She was 35, newly married to David's business partner, pregnant with her first child. Marcus's voice was tight with old pain. David and his partner were embezzling money from their development projects. When Amanda found out and threatened to expose them, they arranged for her to have an accident during a sailing trip. Oh my God, Sarah breathed. Did she? She survived, barely. But she lost the baby, and the trauma destroyed her marriage. David's partner threw himself in front of a train rather than face prosecution, but David covered his tracks too well. We could never prove he was involved. Sarah felt sick as the full scope of David's evil became clear. This wasn't a crime of passion or a midlife crisis gone wrong. This was a pattern of behavior from a man who saw people as obstacles to be removed when they became inconvenient. I've been tracking David ever since, Marcus continued, waiting for him to make another mistake. When he took out that massive life insurance policy on you and started planning this trip, I knew what was coming. So you followed us? Sarah asked. I've been following him for 3 years, Marcus confirmed. My yacht has been equipped with the best surveillance technology money can buy. I have everything. Sarah, video of David and Jessica planning your murder, audio recordings of them discussing the insurance money, evidence of their other crimes. Sarah's hands shook as she processed the information. The pregnant wife betrayed had been saved by someone seeking justice for his own family's destruction. Why didn't you warn me? Sarah asked. If you knew what they were planning, why didn't you contact me beforehand? Marcus's expression was pained. Because I knew you wouldn't believe me. You were trying to save your marriage, attending therapy, giving David chance after chance. If I had approached you with this information, you would have dismissed it as the ravings of someone with a grudge against your husband. Sarah knew he was right, even now, with all the evidence in front of her. Part of her mind was trying to find alternative explanations, ways to rationalize David's behavior. What happens now? Sarah asked quietly. Now you decide what kind of justice you want, Marcus said. I can take this evidence to the authorities, and David and Jessica will be arrested for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and probably half a dozen other crimes. But that could take years to prosecute, and David has connections, rich, powerful connections, who might help him escape real consequences. Marcus leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. Or we could handle this differently. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with her recent ocean ordeal. What do you mean? I mean, we could let David and Jessica think their plan worked. Let them think you're dead. Collect the insurance money. Start their new life in California. Meanwhile, you disappear, recover, have your baby, and we build an airtight case against them that they'll never see coming. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Sarah could picture David and Jessica celebrating her death, dividing up the insurance money, planning their future together while believing they had committed the perfect crime. They would think they got away with murder, Sarah said slowly, right up until the moment you walk back into their lives and destroy them completely. Marcus confirmed. Sarah touched her belly, thinking about her son. Gabriel deserved justice for what his father had tried to do. But more than that, Gabriel deserved a mother who was strong enough to protect him from the evil that had tried to destroy them both. What would I have to do? Sarah asked. Marcus smiled for the first time since she had met him, and Sarah could see why his sister had trusted him to seek justice on her behalf. First, Marcus said, you disappear completely. New identity, new location. The best medical care money can buy while you recover from this trauma and prepare for Gabriel's birth. And then we wait for David and Jessica to get comfortable in their new life. Let them spend the insurance money, start their business, maybe even get married. And when they think they're completely safe, Marcus's smile turned predatory. That's when the dead wife comes back to life. Sarah stared out at the ocean that had nearly become her grave, thinking about David's cold dismissal of their son, Jessica's casual cruelty, the months of lies and manipulation that had led to this moment. The heartbreaking family drama was about to become a revenge story, and Sarah was ready to be the author of her own justice. When do we start? Sarah asked. Marcus's yacht turned toward Nassau, where David and Jessica were probably already celebrating Sarah's death and planning how to spend their blood money. They had no idea that their victim had survived, that their crimes had been recorded, and that justice was coming for them in ways they couldn't imagine. The pregnant wife betrayed was about to become the pregnant wife reborn, and this time, she would be the one holding all the cards. 6 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell sat in a private medical clinic in Miami, watching her own memorial service on Marcus Blackwood's laptop. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a ghost, officially dead according to Bahamian authorities who had recovered pieces of the charter boat that David claimed had exploded while she was aboard. He's actually crying, Sarah said with disgust as the camera focused on David's face during his eulogy. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he spoke about losing the love of his life and their unborn son. Crocodile tears, Marcus observed from his chair beside her hospital bed. Notice how Jessica is standing just out of frame, probably coaching him on his performance. Sarah was now 30 weeks pregnant, and despite the trauma she had endured, Gabriel was thriving. The best prenatal specialist Marcus's money could buy had ensured that her son was healthy and strong, seemingly unaffected by his mother's near-death experience. Look at my sister Emma, Sarah said, pointing to the screen where her younger sister was sobbing in the front row. She really believes I'm dead. This is torture for her. I know it's hard, Marcus said gently, but if Emma knew you were alive, she might accidentally reveal something. David is watching everyone who was close to you, looking for any sign that his plan didn't work perfectly. The memorial service was being held at the church where Sarah and David had been married 15 years earlier. Sarah recognized most of the faces in the congregation, friends from their neighborhood, colleagues from David's company, family members who had watched their relationship grow from college sweethearts to married couple to the tragic end they all believed had occurred. He's actually good at this, Sarah murmured as David spoke about their hopes and dreams for their son. If I didn't know better, I'd believe he was heartbroken. Psychopaths are excellent actors, Marcus replied. They have to be to manipulate people as effectively as they do. Marcus had spent the past 6 weeks educating Sarah about her husband's true nature. Through therapy sessions with Dr. Reginald Hayes, a forensic psychologist who specialized in criminal behavior, Sarah was learning to recognize the patterns of manipulation and abuse that had defined her marriage. Your husband displayed classic signs of what we call instrumental aggression, Dr. Hayes had explained during their session the day before. He didn't attack you in a moment of passion or rage. He planned your murder methodically, over months, because you had become an obstacle to getting what he wanted. Sarah had asked the question that haunted her most. But he seemed to love me. For 15 years, I thought he loved me. He loved what you provided for him, Dr. Hayes clarified. Stability, respectability, financial security. But when Jessica offered him something he wanted more, his so-called love for you evaporated instantly. Now, watching David accept condolences from people who genuinely cared about Sarah, she was beginning to understand the difference between real love and the transactional relationship she had mistaken for a marriage. He's getting impatient, Marcus observed, pointing to the screen where David was checking his watch while talking to Sarah's elderly aunt. The insurance money, Sarah realized. He wants to get through the grieving widower performance so he can collect his reward. Marcus pulled up another window on his laptop, showing financial records his investigators had obtained. The insurance company has already approved the claim. $2.5 million will be transferred to David's account within the week. Assuming no new evidence surfaces, Sarah felt a fierce satisfaction at the thought of David and Jessica spending money they believed they had earned by murdering her and Gabriel. Every dollar they spent would be another nail in their legal coffin. "What about the business?" Sarah asked. "His real estate company." "Collapsing," Marcus said with grim pleasure. Turns out David was embezzling from multiple projects to fund his lifestyle with Jessica. With him distracted by covering up your murder and planning his escape to California, his business partners are starting to notice the missing money. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from the new number Marcus had provided her. The message was from David's business partner, Robert Chen, who had been trying to reach Sarah for weeks about irregularities in the company's accounts. "David told everyone I handled the books," Sarah realized. "If money is missing, he's probably setting it up to look like I was the one who stole it." "Which would make perfect sense from his perspective," Marcus agreed. "Dead wives can't defend themselves against embezzlement charges." The heartbreaking family drama was revealing new layers of David's deception with each passing day. Sarah was learning that her husband had been planning to destroy her reputation along with her life, ensuring that even in death she would be remembered as a criminal rather than a victim. "I want to hurt him," Sarah said quietly, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. "I want him to feel the kind of pain he tried to cause me." Marcus studied her face carefully. "Revenge can be powerful motivation, but it can also consume you if you're not careful. Are you sure you want to go down that path?" Sarah thought about Gabriel, moving restlessly in her womb as if sensing his mother's emotional turmoil. Her son deserved justice, but he also deserved a mother who wasn't destroyed by hatred and bitterness. "I want justice," Sarah clarified. "I want David and Jessica to face consequences for what they did. But I also want to build a life for Gabriel that isn't defined by what his father tried to do to us." "That's a healthy distinction," Marcus said approvingly. "Justice serves a purpose. Revenge just feeds on itself." The memorial service was ending, and Sarah watched David accept a final round of sympathy from the congregation. Jessica appeared briefly in the frame, wearing an appropriately somber black dress and enough makeup to hide any trace of celebration she might be feeling. "When do they leave for California?" Sarah asked. "Next week," Marcus replied. "David's already purchased a house in Malibu under Jessica's name. He's planning to start a new development company there, probably using your insurance money as seed capital." Sarah felt a surge of determination. David thought he had won. He thought he had eliminated the obstacles to his happiness and secured enough money to start fresh with Jessica. He had no idea that his victim was very much alive and planning to destroy everything he thought he had gained. "I want to attend his wedding," Sarah said suddenly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. When David marries Jessica, I want to be there, not to stop it, but to watch. I want to see them at their happiest moment, because that's when I'm going to reveal that I'm alive and that I have evidence of everything they did." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the psychological impact of Sarah's suggestion. "That would certainly be dramatic, but are you sure you want to put yourself through that emotional trauma?" Sarah touched her belly, feeling Gabriel's strong kicks against her ribs. "My son is going to be born in 10 weeks. When he asks me about his father someday, I want to be able to tell him that I fought back, that I didn't let David win." The midlife betrayal story was becoming a tale of resurrection and empowerment. The pregnant wife betrayed was transforming into something David had never anticipated, a worthy adversary who understood exactly how dangerous he was. "All right," Marcus said finally. "If that's what you want, we'll make it happen. But we do this carefully, with backup plans and exit strategies. David has already tried to kill you once. If he realizes you're alive before we're ready, he might try again." Sarah nodded, understanding the risks but feeling stronger than she had in months. Gabriel was thriving, her body was healing, and her mind was clear about what needed to be done. David Mitchell thought he had committed the perfect crime. Sarah was about to teach him that there was no such thing. The dead wife was coming back to life, and this time, she wouldn't be the naive, trusting woman who had been so easy to manipulate. This time, she would be ready for war. On a crisp October morning in Miami, Sarah Mitchell brought Gabriel Marcus Blackwood into the world. She had chosen to give him Marcus's last name legally, both to protect him from his father's legacy and to honor the man who had saved their lives. "He's perfect," Marcus whispered, holding Gabriel for the first time while Sarah recovered from the delivery. At 7 pounds, 3 ounces, Gabriel was healthy and strong despite the trauma his mother had endured during pregnancy. "Look at those eyes," Sarah said softly, studying her son's face. Gabriel had David's dark eyes but Sarah's stubborn chin, and she could already see an intelligence there that reminded her of herself rather than his father. Marcus had been with Sarah through every prenatal appointment, every ultrasound, every moment of anxiety about whether Gabriel would be affected by the stress of his mother's near-death experience. Now, holding the baby he had helped bring safely into the world, Marcus felt an unexpected surge of paternal protectiveness. "He's lucky to have you as a mother," Marcus told Sarah as he carefully placed Gabriel in her arms. "We're both lucky to have you," Sarah replied, and she meant it. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had become more than her protector and ally in seeking justice against David. He had become her closest friend, her confidant, and increasingly, something more. Dr. Patricia Caldwell, the therapist who had been helping Sarah process her trauma, had warned her about the psychological phenomenon of trauma bonding. It's natural to feel intense gratitude and connection to someone who saves your life, Dr. Caldwell had explained. But make sure you're distinguishing between gratitude and genuine romantic feelings. Sarah was becoming increasingly certain that what she felt for Marcus went far beyond gratitude. He was intelligent, kind, protective without being controlling, and genuinely committed to justice rather than revenge. Most importantly, he loved Gabriel as if the baby were his own son. "Any word from California?" Sarah asked as she attempted to breastfeed Gabriel for the first time. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "David and Jessica got married yesterday. Small ceremony in Malibu, just like we expected." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions at the news. Relief that her sham marriage to David was truly over. Anger that he was celebrating a new beginning built on her supposed death. And a fierce satisfaction that his happiness was about to be destroyed. "Did our photographer get pictures? Everything is documented," Marcus assured her. David and Jessica on the beach, exchanging vows, celebrating with champagne. The insurance money has been transferred to their joint account, and they've already started spending it on their new house and David's business. Sarah had spent months planning David's downfall with the precision of a military campaign. Every financial transaction, every public appearance, every moment of happiness he shared with Jessica was being recorded and compiled into evidence that would destroy them both. "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "Something you need to know before we proceed with the next phase?" Sarah looked up from Gabriel, instantly alert to the change in Marcus's tone. "What is it?" Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed Sarah a series of photographs. "David's been investigating your death more thoroughly than we expected. He's hired a private investigator to look into the boat explosion, the recovery efforts, everything." Sarah's blood ran cold as she studied the photos. They showed David meeting with a man she didn't recognize, reviewing documents that appeared to be official reports from the Bahamian authorities. "Does he suspect I'm alive?" "I don't think so," Marcus said slowly. "But I think he's paranoid about loose ends. David is the kind of man who doesn't leave anything to chance." Sarah felt a chill of fear, not for herself, but for Gabriel. "What kind of loose ends?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. "There were no body parts recovered from the boat explosion. Sarah, the Bahamian authorities classified you as presumed dead, but David knows that's not the same thing as confirmed dead. So what is he looking for? Proof that you're actually dead, or proof that you're not?" Sarah held Gabriel closer, her mind racing through the implications. If David discovered she was alive before they were ready to reveal themselves, he might try to finish what he started in the Bahamas. "We need to accelerate our timeline," Sarah said decisively. "Are you sure you're ready?" Marcus asked. "Gabriel is only 3 days old. You're still recovering from childbirth. We can wait a few more weeks." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Every day we wait is another day David gets more suspicious, more paranoid. And every day we wait is another day he's walking around free after trying to murder me and my son." The female empowerment that had been building in Sarah over the past months crystallized into determination. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a mother with something to protect, and there was no force on earth more dangerous than a mother defending her child. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked down at Gabriel, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that his father had tried to kill him before he was even born. Gabriel deserved to grow up knowing that justice had been served, that his mother had been strong enough to fight back against evil. "I want to go public," Sarah said. "Not gradually, not carefully. I want to call a press conference and reveal everything at once, and watch David's world collapse in real time." Marcus studied her face, seeing the steel that had developed beneath Sarah's gentle exterior. "That's risky. If we go public before the authorities are ready to act, David might flee the country." "Then we make sure the authorities are ready," Sarah replied. "How long would it take to get arrest warrants prepared?" Marcus smiled grimly. "I've been working on that for months. My lawyers have been coordinating with prosecutors in both Florida and California. We could have warrants issued within hours of going public." Sarah felt a surge of fierce anticipation. David thought he had outsmarted everyone, that he had committed the perfect crime and escaped to his perfect new life with Jessica. He had no idea that every move he had made since the day he left Sarah to die had been monitored and documented. "There's something poetic about destroying his life right after he married Jessica," Sarah mused. "All those dreams they had about their future together. All those plans they made with my insurance money." "Sarah," Marcus said gently, "are you sure this is about justice and not revenge?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The line between justice and revenge had blurred over the past months, and she wasn't entirely sure where one ended and the other began. "Maybe it's both," she admitted. "But David tried to kill me and our son, Marcus. He planned it for months, executed it without a moment of hesitation, and then celebrated afterward. If wanting him to suffer for that makes me vindictive, then I guess I'm vindictive." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand. Just remember that Gabriel is going to grow up with whatever legacy comes out of this. Make sure it's a legacy you want him to inherit." Sarah looked down at her son, thinking about the man she wanted him to become. Strong enough to fight injustice, compassionate enough to help others, smart enough to recognize evil when he encountered it. "I want Gabriel to know that when someone tries to destroy you, you don't just survive," Sarah said quietly. "You fight back. You make them face consequences. You protect other people from becoming their next victims." The heartbreaking family drama was about to become a public reckoning. David Mitchell had tried to silence his pregnant wife permanently, but instead he had created an enemy more formidable than he could have imagined. The dead wife was about to resurrect herself in the most public way possible, and this time, the whole world would be watching. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. Pacific time on a Tuesday morning, deliberately timed to coincide with David's first major business presentation to potential investors in his new California development company. Sarah wanted him to be in front of cameras, celebrating his success, when news of her resurrection hit the airwaves. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as Sarah adjusted the microphone clipped to her navy blue dress. Gabriel was sleeping peacefully in his carrier beside her chair, seemingly unaware that his existence was about to become international news. "I've been ready for months," Sarah replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed her prepared statement one final time. The media turnout was impressive. Marcus's public relations team had leaked just enough information to ensure coverage without revealing the full scope of the story. CNN, Fox News, NBC, and dozens of other outlets had representatives in the Miami hotel conference room, all expecting to hear from a woman who had supposedly died 4 months earlier. "We go live in 30 seconds," the CNN producer announced. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The heartbreaking discovery during pregnancy, the attempted murder in shark-infested waters, months of hiding while building an airtight case against her husband. Today, the pregnant wife betrayed would become the woman who refused to stay dead. And we're live in 3, 2, 1. Sarah looked directly into the camera and began to speak with a clarity and strength that surprised even her. "My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 4 months ago, my husband David Mitchell and his mistress Jessica Crane tried to murder me and my unborn son in the waters off Nassau. They believed they had succeeded. They were wrong." The reaction in the room was immediate and electric. Reporters began shouting questions. Cameras flashed, and Sarah could see the CNN producer frantically talking into his headset, probably alerting the network that they had stumbled onto the story of the year. "4 months ago, I was 6 months pregnant when I discovered my husband's affair with his secretary," Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Instead of asking for a divorce, David planned what he thought would be the perfect murder. He convinced me to join him on a baby moon in the Bahamas, then abandoned me in shark-infested waters during what was supposed to be a romantic snorkeling trip." Sarah paused, letting the magnitude of her accusation settle over the room. "I survived because of the intervention of Marcus Blackwood, whose yacht was in the area when David left me to die. Since then, we have been building evidence of David's crimes, including his embezzlement of funds from his real estate company, insurance fraud, and attempted murder." The questions came rapid fire now. "Mrs. Mitchell, where have you been for the past 4 months? How do you know the murder attempt was premeditated? What evidence do you have?" Sarah held up her hand for silence. "All of your questions will be answered by the evidence we're releasing today. Video recordings of David and Jessica planning my murder, financial records showing their embezzlement scheme, documentation of the insurance fraud they committed after my supposed death." In California, David was 15 minutes into his presentation to a room full of potential investors when his assistant burst into the conference room, her face white with panic. She whispered something in David's ear that made him go rigid with shock. "Excuse me," David said to the confused investors. "I need to take an urgent call." But by the time David reached his office and turned on the television, it was too late. Sarah's face filled the screen, very much alive, holding the son he had tried to kill, systematically destroying the life he had built on her supposed death. "Holy shit," Jessica breathed, standing beside David in his office as they watched their world collapse in real time. The midlife betrayal story was becoming a public humiliation beyond anything David could have imagined. Social media immediately exploded with hashtags like "Rachu's Shark Wife Returns" and "Dead Wife Revenge." The story was trending worldwide within minutes. "This bitch," Jessica snarled, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "This stupid, pathetic bitch somehow survived." But David wasn't listening to Jessica's tirade. He was calculating, trying to figure out how much evidence Sarah could actually have, how much damage control was possible, how quickly he could disappear before the authorities arrived. "We need to leave," David said suddenly. "Right now. Get to the airport. Get on a plane to somewhere without extradition treaties." "Are you insane?" Jessica snapped. "We can't just run. That would prove we're guilty." "We are guilty," David shouted, his careful facade finally cracking. "We tried to murder a pregnant woman. Jessica. We left her to die in the ocean. Running is the only option we have left." But even as David spoke, he could hear sirens approaching his office building. Marcus's coordination with law enforcement had been flawless. Arrest warrants had been issued the moment Sarah went public, and police in both California and Florida were moving simultaneously to prevent either suspect from escaping. "David Mitchell, you are under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and embezzlement," the lead detective announced as he and 6 other officers burst into David's office. Jessica tried to run, but she made it exactly 3 steps before being tackled by a female officer who had been waiting in the hallway. The press conference was still ongoing when news of the arrest broke. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction as Marcus whispered the news in her ear. "David and Jessica are in custody," Marcus murmured. "Both of them. No bail, maximum security." Sarah nodded, maintaining her composure as she answered more questions from the press. But inside, she felt a fierce joy that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. Gabriel would grow up knowing that his father faced consequences for trying to kill him. Other women would be warned about David's capacity for violence. Jessica's willingness to participate in murder would be exposed for the world to see. "Mrs. Oz Mitchell," a reporter called out, "what do you want people to learn from your story?" Sarah looked down at Gabriel, then back at the cameras that were broadcasting her words around the world. "I want women to trust their instincts when something feels wrong in their relationships," Sarah said. "I want them to know that manipulation and emotional abuse often escalate to physical violence. And I want them to understand that no matter how powerless they feel, no matter how hopeless their situation seems, they can survive and they can fight back." The therapy and self-discovery that had been part of Sarah's healing process over the past months had taught her that her story was bigger than just her personal quest for justice. The heartbreaking family drama was also a cautionary tale about recognizing dangerous partners, trusting gut instincts, and finding the strength to rebuild after devastating betrayal. "Most importantly," Sarah continued, "I want other women to know that they don't have to face abuse alone. There are people who will help, resources available, ways to escape even the most carefully planned traps." As the press conference ended and reporters scrambled to file their stories, Sarah felt a sense of completion that went beyond mere satisfaction. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a voice for other victims, a symbol of resilience that would outlast the immediate drama of David's arrest and trial. Gabriel stirred in his carrier, opening his dark eyes and looking up at his mother with the serious expression she was learning was characteristic of his personality. "It's over, little one," Sarah whispered to her son. "The bad man can't hurt us anymore." But even as she spoke those words, Sarah knew that the legal battle was just beginning. David would hire expensive lawyers, claim innocence, try to portray Sarah as unstable or vindictive. Jessica would probably blame everything on David, claim she was manipulated into participating. The fight for justice was far from over. But today marked the end of David's freedom and the beginning of Gabriel's future as the son of a woman who refused to be silenced. The heartbreaking family drama had become a story of triumph, and Sarah was ready for whatever came next. The trial of David Mitchell and Jessica Crane became the most closely watched legal proceeding of the year. Court TV provided gavel-to-gavel coverage, and social media buzzed with daily updates as the prosecution methodically dismantled David's carefully constructed lies. Sarah sat in the front row of the courtroom every day, Gabriel sleeping peacefully in her arms as she watched her husband's defense crumble, Marcus beside her, providing silent support as Sarah faced the man who had tried to murder her and their son. "The prosecution calls Sarah Mitchell to the stand," announced District Attorney Janet Rodriguez, a formidable woman who had built her reputation prosecuting domestic violence cases. Sarah handed Gabriel to Marcus and walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She had been preparing for this moment for months, working with Dr. Caldwell to process her trauma while building the mental strength needed to face David in court. "Mrs. Mitchell," de Rodriguez began, "please tell the court about the morning you discovered your husband's affair." Sarah's voice was clear and steady as she recounted the devastating discovery at the medical center, David's cold admission of his 8-month affair, and his casual dismissal of their unborn son. "He told me he never really wanted children," Sarah testified, her gaze fixed on the jury rather than David. "He said the pregnancy was what I wanted, not what he wanted." From the defense table, David stared at Sarah with an expression of hatred so pure that several jurors visibly recoiled. His expensive lawyers had advised him to appear remorseful, but David's narcissistic rage made that impossible. "Mrs. Mitchell," de Rodriguez continued, Take us through the events of the day your husband attempted to murder you. Sarah's testimony about the baby moon, the boat trip, and David's abandonment of her in shark-infested waters riveted the courtroom. When she described watching David and Jessica sail away while she treaded water with contractions threatening her pregnancy, several jurors were visibly emotional. "Did you believe you were going to die?" De Rodriguez asked. "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "I believe my son and I were both going to die, and that David would collect our life insurance money and start a new life with Jessica." During cross-examination, David's lawyer tried to portray Sarah as an unstable woman who had fabricated the entire story for attention and money. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Mitchell, that you discovered significant financial irregularities in your husband's business accounts?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "And isn't it true that you had access to those accounts?" "I helped with bookkeeping." "Yes." "So you had both motive and opportunity to embezzle funds from the company, didn't you?" Sarah's response was devastating in its simplicity. "I was 6 months pregnant and planning a nursery. Why would I embezzle money and then fake my own death instead of simply divorcing my husband and taking half our assets legally?" The defense's case fell apart completely when Marcus's surveillance footage was admitted into evidence. The jury watched in horrified silence as David and Jessica were shown planning Sarah's murder in explicit detail. "We wait until she's far from shore," David's voice said clearly through the courtroom speakers. "Then we take the boat and leave her. The sharks will take care of the rest." "What about the baby?" Jessica's voice asked. "What about it?" David replied coldly. "Dead wives don't collect child support." Jessica's testimony was equally damning. Faced with overwhelming evidence, she had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her description of David as a manipulative psychopath who had convinced her that murder was their only option painted a picture of a man completely lacking in empathy or remorse. "He told me Sarah was unstable," Jessica testified, tears streaming down her face. "He said she was threatening to hurt herself and the baby if he left her. He made it sound like we were saving the baby by getting rid of Sarah. But you knew the plan was to kill both Sarah and her unborn child," De Rodriguez pressed. "Yes," Jessica whispered. "But David said it would be quick, that they wouldn't suffer." The moral lessons on resilience that Sarah had been sharing through her blog and speaking engagements were validated by her strength during the trial. She faced cross-examination with grace, answered difficult questions with honesty, and never once appeared vindictive or unstable despite everything she had endured. "Mrs. Mitchell," David's lawyer asked during a particularly aggressive cross-examination, "if your husband is as evil as you claim, why did you stay married to him for 15 years? Sarah's answer resonated throughout the courtroom. "Because emotional abuse is insidious. It happens gradually, over years, until you no longer trust your own perceptions. David was an expert at making me doubt myself, making me believe his problems were my fault. It took almost losing my life to understand that the problem was never me." The female empowerment message in Sarah's testimony inspired women across the country. Support groups formed around her story, and domestic violence organizations reported increased calls from women seeking help to escape abusive relationships. When the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Sarah felt a satisfaction that went far beyond personal vindication. David was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Jessica received 25 years for her cooperation, but would serve every day knowing that her greed had cost 2 innocent lives. Outside the courthouse, Sarah spoke to the assembled media with Gabriel in her arms and Marcus at her side. "Today's verdict can't undo the trauma my son and I experienced," Sarah said. "But it can prevent David from hurting anyone else, and it sends a message that attempted murder will not be tolerated, even when the victims survive to tell their story." A reporter called out, "Mrs. Mitchell, what's next for you and Gabriel?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who had been her anchor through months of legal proceedings and emotional healing. Over the past year, their relationship had evolved from rescuer and victim to true partnership. Marcus loved Gabriel as his own son, and Sarah had learned to trust again, despite everything David had done to destroy her faith in love. Gabriel and I are going to build the life we deserve, Sarah replied. We're going to focus on healing, on helping other families facing domestic violence, and on showing the world that survival is just the beginning of recovery. What Sarah didn't say publicly was that she and Marcus had already been discussing marriage, not because she needed rescuing or protecting, but because they had built something real together based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. The heartbreaking family drama had become a love story after all, just not the one anyone could have predicted. As Sarah walked away from the courthouse with Gabriel and Marcus, she felt the profound satisfaction of justice served and the exciting anticipation of a future built on truth rather than lies. David's attempt to destroy her had instead made her stronger than she had ever imagined possible. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a woman who knew her own worth and would never settle for less than she deserved. The midlife betrayal story was ending, but Sarah's new life was just beginning. 2 years after David's conviction, Sarah stood at the podium of the Miami Convention Center, addressing an audience of 3,000 women at the International Conference on Domestic Violence Awareness. Her book, Surviving the Sharks, A Journey from Betrayal to Empowerment, had spent 47 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and established Sarah as one of the most sought-after speakers on trauma recovery. The hardest part about surviving abuse, Sarah told the rapt audience, isn't the physical danger or even the emotional manipulation. It's learning to trust yourself again, learning to believe that your instincts are valid, that your feelings matter, that you deserve better. In the front row, Marcus sat with 18-month-old Gabriel on his lap and 6-month-old Sophia sleeping in her carrier beside him. Sarah's daughter had Marcus's blue eyes and Sarah's determined chin, and she was already showing signs of the strong personality that seemed to run in the family. The therapy and self-discovery that had begun during Sarah's recovery had evolved into a comprehensive approach to healing that she now shared with audiences around the world. Her foundation, Phoenix Rising, provided counseling services, legal assistance, and safe housing for women escaping abusive relationships. Recovery isn't linear, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. There will be days when you feel strong and empowered, and days when you feel broken and afraid. Both kinds of days are part of the healing process. After her speech, Sarah was surrounded by women wanting to share their own stories, seeking advice, or simply expressing gratitude for her willingness to speak publicly about domestic abuse. These interactions were both the most rewarding and most emotionally draining part of Sarah's new career. "You saved my life," a young woman whispered to Sarah as she signed a copy of her book. "Reading about your experience gave me the courage to leave my husband before he could hurt our baby." "You saved your own life," Sarah corrected gently. "I just showed you that it was possible." Later that evening, Sarah and Marcus sat on the terrace of their Coral Gables home, watching Gabriel play with his toy trains while Sophia napped in Marcus's arms. The house was everything Sarah had dreamed of, spacious but warm, filled with books and art and evidence of a family that was genuinely happy. "Good speech today," Marcus said, stroking Sophia's dark hair. "The part about trusting your instincts was particularly powerful." "I've been thinking about that a lot lately," Sarah replied, but there was something in her tone that made Marcus look at her sharply. "What kind of thinking?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Gabriel's intense concentration as he lined up his trains in perfect rows. "Have you noticed anything different about your travel schedule recently?" Marcus's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight hesitation before he answered. "Different how? More trips to New York, longer meetings that run late into the evening, phone calls you take in your office with the door closed." The financial hardship after betrayal that Sarah had overcome had taught her to pay attention to details, to notice patterns, to trust her instincts even when they led to uncomfortable conclusions. "Sarah, you know my business requires a lot of travel," Marcus said carefully. "The investment firm has offices in 6 cities." "I know," Sarah replied, "and I know that for the past 18 months, you've been completely transparent about your schedule. But for the past 6 weeks, something has changed." Hunain. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah felt a familiar chill of anxiety. Not the bone-deep terror she had felt with David, but the uncomfortable awareness that someone she trusted was not being entirely honest with her. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said finally. Sarah's heart rate increased, but she kept her voice steady. "What is it?" "I've been meeting with David." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Excuse me. He's been writing to me from prison, calling when he can get access to a phone. He wants to see Gabriel." Sarah stood up so quickly that her chair nearly toppled over. "He wants to see Gabriel, the son he tried to murder." "Sarah, please sit down. Let me explain." But Sarah was already reaching for Gabriel, scooping him up with a protectiveness that came from the deepest part of her maternal instincts. "Mommy," Gabriel asked, sensing his mother's distress. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart," Sarah said, though her voice was tight with fear and anger. "Why don't you go inside and wash your hands for dinner?" Once Gabriel was safely inside the house, Sarah turned back to Marcus with an expression he had never seen before, the same steel that had carried her through months of planning David's downfall. "How long?" Sarah asked. 6 weeks, Marcus admitted. "Since his lawyer contacted me about potential visitation rights." "Visitation rights?" Sarah's voice rose dangerously. "Marcus, that man tried to kill me and Gabriel. He has no rights where my son is concerned. Legally, he's still Gabriel's biological father," Marcus said quietly. "His conviction doesn't automatically terminate his parental rights?" "Then we'll make sure it does," Sarah snapped. "We'll fight it in court. We'll appeal. We'll do whatever it takes." "Sarah, there's more." The tone of Marcus's voice made Sarah's blood run cold. "What more?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring down at Sophia as if she could provide him with the right words. "David claims he has information about my business dealings that could be damaging if it became public." "What kind of information?" "The kind that could destroy Phoenix Rising, discredit your book, potentially even lead to criminal charges." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet in a way that was horribly familiar. The perfect life she had built with Marcus, the family they had created together, the mission that gave her life meaning, all of it was suddenly threatened by the man she thought she had defeated. "Marcus, what is David talking about?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus looked up at her with an expression of pain and guilt that made Sarah's worst fears crystallize into certainty. "My investment firm has been laundering money for some very dangerous people," Marcus said quietly. "David knows about it because some of that money came through his real estate projects." The heartbreaking family drama was beginning all over again. But this time Sarah knew the warning signs. This time she would not be caught off guard by betrayal. "How long have you been laundering money?" Sarah asked, her voice deadly calm. 5 years, since before I met you. And David's been blackmailing you." "Not blackmailing exactly. More like leveraging his knowledge to get what he wants." Sarah looked at Marcus holding their daughter, thought about the life they had built together, the trust she had learned to give again after David's betrayal, the man who had saved her life, who had helped her get justice, who had loved Gabriel as his own son. That man was also a criminal who had been lying to her for 2 years. "I need you to leave," Sarah said quietly. "Sarah, please. Let me explain everything. Let me show you how we can handle this." "You can explain everything to my lawyer," Sarah replied. "Right now, I need you to pack a bag and leave this house." Marcus stood up, still holding Sophia, and Sarah felt a moment of panic as she realized he could simply walk away with their daughter the same way David had tried to walk away from their marriage. "Give me Sophia," Sarah said. "Sarah, she's my daughter too. And Gabriel is David's son. But that didn't stop him from trying to kill him." Sarah shot back. "Give me my daughter. Marcus." The pain in Marcus's eyes was genuine, but Sarah had learned not to trust pain or remorse or any other emotion that could be performed for an audience. Marcus handed Sophia to Sarah, their fingers brushing for a moment in a contact that felt like goodbye. "I love you," Marcus said quietly. "I love both our children. Everything I did to protect this family." "David said the same thing," Sarah replied, "right before he left me to die in shark-infested waters." As Marcus walked into the house to pack his things, Sarah sat on the terrace holding her daughter and watching Gabriel play innocently inside. The perfect life she thought she had built was crumbling again. But this time Sarah was not the naive, trusting woman who had been so easy to manipulate. This time she would protect her children from the very beginning. This time she would not wait for more lies or betrayals or attempts at manipulation. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a mother who would fight any battle necessary to keep her children safe, even if it meant fighting the man who had once saved her life. 3 months after discovering Marcus's deception, Sarah sat in her lawyer's office reviewing the evidence that would destroy the second man she had trusted with her heart and her children's future. The files spread across the conference table told a story that made David's crime seem almost simple in comparison. The money laundering operation goes back 7 years, attorney Patricia Williams explained, pointing to financial records that Marcus's own investigators had helped compile. Conservative estimate, we're looking at over $50 million in dirty money that passed through his investment firm. Sarah studied the documents with the same methodical attention she had once applied to planning David's downfall. Gabriel played quietly in the corner of the office, while Sophia napped in her carrier, both children blissfully unaware that their lives were about to change dramatically again. "What about the federal charges?" Sarah asked. "Already filed. The FBI has been building a case against Marcus's clients for 2 years. Your cooperation in providing evidence has accelerated their timeline significantly." Sarah felt a familiar mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Marcus had saved her life, helped her get justice against David, and given her Sophia. But he had also lied to her for 2 years and potentially put her children in danger by associating with organized crime figures. "There's something else," Attorney Williams said carefully. "Something about Marcus that you need to know before you make your final decision about testifying against him." Sarah looked up from the financial records, noting the hesitation in her lawyer's voice. "What is it?" Attorney Williams pulled out a thick file labeled Blackwood Investigation, Confidential. "We hired private investigators to look into Marcus's background after you asked us to handle your divorce proceedings," she explained. "What they found suggests that your relationship with Marcus may not have been as coincidental as you believed." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's air conditioning. "What do you mean Marcus has been involved with 3 other women over the past 10 years? All of them were victims of violent crimes. All of them were wealthy. And all of them disappeared under mysterious circumstances after becoming involved with Marcus." The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each revelation more devastating than the last. "Disappeared how?" Amanda Jeffries, 2015, divorced her abusive husband after Marcus helped her build a case against him. 6 months later, she was found dead in her home, apparent suicide, left everything to Marcus in her will. Sarah's hands began to shake as she processed the implications. Carmen Rodriguez, 2017, escaped a kidnapping attempt with Marcus's help. 8 months later, died in a car accident. Again, Marcus was the primary beneficiary of her estate. And the third woman, Elena Volkov, 2019. Marcus helped her divorce a Russian oligarch who had been beating her. She died of an apparent overdose 14 months later. Another will that left everything to Marcus. Sarah felt physically sick as she realized the scope of Marcus's deception. The man who had presented himself as her savior, who had claimed to understand her trauma because of what happened to his sister, had been systematically targeting vulnerable women for years. "His sister," Sarah whispered. "The story about Amanda Blackwood and David's business partner. Was any of that true?" Attorney Williams shook her head grimly. "Amanda Blackwood does exist, and she was married to one of David's business associates, but she wasn't Marcus's sister, and she didn't die in a sailing accident. She's very much alive and living in Seattle under her maiden name." The heartbreaking family drama was revealing its final, most devastating twist. Sarah hadn't been rescued by a white knight seeking justice for his sister. She had been targeted by a predator who specialized in rescuing vulnerable women long enough to gain their trust and access to their assets. "How much money are we talking about?" Sarah asked quietly. "Between the three previous victims and what Marcus stood to gain from you, approximately $15 million. Sarah thought about her best-selling book, her speaking fees, the success of Phoenix Rising, the life insurance policies Marcus had encouraged her to take out for the children's security. She had been worth far more to Marcus dead than alive, just like David's original plan. "The money laundering," Sarah said suddenly, "that was his cover story. Wasn't it a way to explain why he needed to disappear if I started asking too many questions?" "We believe so. Yes. Marcus is much more sophisticated than David ever was. Where David relied on brute force and obvious deception, Marcus used psychological manipulation and long-term planning." Sarah looked at Gabriel, who was building an elaborate tower with his blocks, completely absorbed in his innocent project. Her son had no idea that the man he called Daddy was potentially more dangerous than his biological father. "What about Sophia?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Is Marcus planning to—" "We don't know," Attorney Williams admitted. "But given his pattern with other victims, we have to assume that both you and your children are in danger as long as Marcus has access to you." Sarah felt the familiar steel settling into her spine, the same determination that had carried her through David's trial and the rebuilding of her life afterward. "What do you need from me to put him away forever?" Attorney Williams smiled grimly. "Your testimony, the financial records you helped us obtain, and one more thing." "What?" "We need Marcus to incriminate himself. The FBI wants to record a conversation where he admits to his crimes." Sarah considered the request, thinking about the risks involved in confronting a man who had potentially killed 3 women. But she also thought about Gabriel and Sophia, about the other women Marcus might target if he remained free, about the responsibility she had to stop him. When Sarah asked, "Tomorrow and Marcus has been trying to contact you for weeks about working things out. We want you to agree to meet with him, wearing a wire, and get him to admit what he's done." Sarah nodded, feeling the same calm determination that had carried her through the worst moments of her life. "I'll do it, but I want protective custody for my children during the meeting." "Already arranged." That night, Sarah sat in her empty house, reviewing the script the FBI had prepared for her conversation with Marcus. The questions were designed to elicit confessions without seeming too obvious, to draw out admissions that would hold up in court. But Sarah had her own questions, things she needed to know for her own peace of mind. Had Marcus really loved her? Or had she just been another Mark? Had any of their relationship been real? Or had it all been performance? Most importantly, had he ever intended to harm Gabriel and Sophia? Or were they collateral damage in his larger scheme? As Sarah prepared for what might be the most dangerous conversation of her life, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a woman who refused to be anyone's victim, no matter how charming or convincing they might be. David had tried to destroy her with obvious cruelty. Marcus had tried to destroy her with fake kindness. Both men had underestimated her strength, her intelligence, and her determination to protect her children. Tomorrow, Sarah would face the man who had saved her life only to plan her death. But tonight, she was no longer the trusting woman who had been so easy to manipulate. Tonight, she was a mother with something to protect, and there was no force on earth more dangerous than that. The final confrontation was coming, and this time, Sarah would be the one holding all the cards. The shark in sheep's clothing was about to discover that his latest victim had grown teeth of her own. 1 year later, Sarah stood on the balcony of her new home in Carmel, California, watching Gabriel and Sophia play in the garden below. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before them, but instead of the terror she had once felt around large bodies of water, Sarah now found the ocean peaceful and healing. Marcus had been sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole after pleading guilty to 3 counts of murder in the first degree and multiple financial crimes. His recorded confession to Sarah had provided the evidence needed to solve cold cases in 3 states, bringing closure to families who had waited years for answers about their daughters' deaths. David remained in prison in Florida, his attempts to gain visitation rights with Gabriel definitively denied after Sarah's lawyers presented evidence of his ongoing threats and manipulation attempts. The parental rights termination had been swift and final, legally severing any connection between David and the son he had tried to murder. "Mama, look," Gabriel called out, now 3 years old and full of the confidence that came from being genuinely loved and protected. He had built an elaborate sandcastle in their garden sandbox, complete with towers and walls that reminded Sarah of his early block constructions. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah called back, smiling at her son's creativity and resilience. Sophia, now walking and babbling constantly, toddled over to her brother's creation and promptly sat down in the middle of it, destroying weeks of careful construction in a single moment. Instead of crying or getting angry, Gabriel laughed and began rebuilding immediately. "It's okay, Sophia," he told his sister patiently. "We can make it better." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at her son's response. Despite everything he had been through, the attempted murder, the betrayals, the legal battles, Gabriel had somehow retained an optimism and resilience that amazed everyone who knew him. "He's a remarkable child," Dr. Caldwell had observed during their last therapy session. "Children are incredibly adaptable, but Gabriel seems to have inherited your strength along with your determination." Sarah's new book, The Sharks Among Us: Recognizing Predators in Our Lives, had been released 6 months earlier and was already being developed into a documentary series. The book detailed not just David's attempted murder and Marcus's elaborate deception, but also the patterns that allowed such predators to operate successfully for years. "The most dangerous predators," Sarah had written, "are not the obviously violent ones like David. They're the ones like Marcus, who rescue you just convincingly enough to gain your trust, then slowly begin the process of destroying you from within." Phoenix Rising had expanded to operate in 12 states, providing comprehensive services to domestic abuse survivors. Sarah's speaking engagements now included law enforcement training, helping police and prosecutors recognize the sophisticated manipulation tactics used by predators who targeted vulnerable women. "Mama," Sophia's voice interrupted Sarah's thoughts as her daughter pointed excitedly at something in the garden. Sarah looked down to see a young man she didn't recognize talking to Gabriel near the garden gate. Her protective instincts immediately activated, and she was down the stairs and outside within seconds. "Gabriel, come here, please," Sarah called, keeping her voice calm but firm. "This is Dr. Chen," Gabriel announced proudly as he ran to his mother. "He's a nice doctor." Sarah studied the stranger carefully. He appeared to be in his early 30s, Asian American, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that reminded her of Dr. Martinez, Gabriel's former pediatrician. "I'm James Chen," the man said, extending his hand to Sarah. "I just moved in next door, and your son was showing me his impressive architectural skills." Sarah shook his hand cautiously, noting the medical school ring and the genuine warmth in his smile. "Sarah Mitchell," she replied. "And thank you, but we have strict rules about talking to strangers." "Of course," Dr. Chen said immediately. "I should have introduced myself to you first. I'm a pediatric surgeon at UCSF. Just bought the house next door. Your children seem wonderful." Something in his tone and manner reminded Sarah of the genuine kindness she had once thought she saw in Marcus. But Sarah had learned to distinguish between performance and authenticity, between rescue fantasies and real respect. "It's nice to meet you," Sarah said politely. "Gabriel, Sophia, time to come inside." Dr. Chen smiled and waved goodbye to the children, but he didn't try to prolong the conversation or ask personal questions or offer unsolicited help. Those were all green flags that Sarah had learned to recognize. Later that evening, as Sarah tucked Gabriel into bed, her son asked the question she had been dreading for months. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy like other kids?" Sarah had been preparing for this conversation with Dr. Caldwell's help, but it was still one of the hardest moments of her parenting journey. "You do have a father, Gabriel," Sarah said carefully. But sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love. Your biological father made choices that weren't safe for you or for me. But Marcus was nice to us, Gabriel said, his 3-year-old mind struggling to understand the complexity of adult deception. Marcus seemed nice, Sarah corrected gently. But sometimes people pretend to be different than they really are. My job is to keep you and Sophia safe, even from people who seem nice but might not be good for our family. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness that characterized his personality. Will we ever have a daddy who's really nice? He asked. Sarah's heart broke a little at the longing in her son's voice, but she had learned not to make promises she couldn't keep. I don't know, sweetheart, she answered honestly. But I know that you and Sophia and I are a family, and we love each other, and that's the most important thing. And we're strong, Gabriel added, repeating something Sarah often told him. We're very strong, Sarah confirmed. Strong enough to handle anything. As Sarah kissed Gabriel goodnight and checked on sleeping Sophia, she reflected on how far they had come. The heartbreaking family drama that had begun with David's betrayal had taught her that strength came not from avoiding danger, but from recognizing it and responding appropriately. Sarah had learned to trust her instincts, to verify rather than simply believe, to protect rather than just hope. She had learned that real love didn't require rescue fantasies or dramatic gestures. It required consistency, honesty, and respect. The pregnant wife betrayed had become a woman who would never again mistake manipulation for love or control for protection. She had built a life based on her own strength rather than dependence on others, and she was teaching her children to do the same. The midlife betrayal story had ended, but Sarah's story was just beginning. She was only 41 years old, with decades ahead of her to continue growing, healing, and helping others find their own strength. As Sarah settled into her evening routine, she felt the deep satisfaction that came from surviving not just one predator, but two. She had protected her children, built a meaningful career, and created a life that was authentically hers. The sharks had tested her, but they had not destroyed her. Instead, they had taught her to swim in deeper waters than she had ever imagined possible. And that, Sarah knew, was the most important lesson of all survival, was not just about enduring trauma, but about transforming it into wisdom, strength, and the ability to help others find their own way to safety. The pregnant wife left in shark-infested waters had learned to be a shark herself, not to prey on others, but to protect those she loved from the predators who would try to destroy them. It was a lesson worth every painful step of the journey that had brought her home. The end.